jumping in. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. I'm excited to connect with my good friend who's a neighbor who I don't see often enough, Mr. Ernest Crim III, your favorite Black history teacher. Figures Black History Month and no better time to elevate Black voices. If you saw my Substack piece on February 1st, first day of Black History Month, I called out two calls to action for non Black people. One of them is to listen, and the other one is to act. And you can't just do one. You got to do both. You got to listen to Black leaders, and then you got to act upon the wisdom that they're sharing. And the example I gave was of how many people, politicians, are quoting Dr. King and quoting his message of anti-racism, of anti-military, anti-poverty, and then turning around and promoting ICE, promoting a massive military budget, and promoting cutting food stamps and free school lunches. So I think there's no better person right now to get us kickstarted than my good friend, my brother, Mr. Ernest Crim III. Ernest, thanks for being with us today, man.
Man, thanks for having me, brother. I look forward to the conversation.
I remember when I moved back to Chicago 5, 6 years ago. I grew up here, went out to Virginia for law school, and when I moved back, I've been following your work for some time, and then lo and behold, we found a spot that's 15, 20 minutes from your place. So it's a small
Yeah.
world how this works out.
Yeah,
Um,
when you reached out, I told you I've been following you on Twitter for a while. I had
yeah,
no idea you were from around here. So like, yeah, for the listeners, we are legit in the same
yeah.
community. That's why Chicago and the surrounding suburbs are just like the greatest place to be.
It is. It's amazing. It's amazing. I still think it's the best city to live in because it's still not that anywhere is cheap, but it's much more affordable compared to the coast. And then if you want to fly to each coast, you can do so almost as a day trip. Really, you don't need to spend the night either. But let's dive in. There's a lot to cover, and I want to start with kind of your framing of Black history. I think is one that I'm always inspired by, and it's something that you don't just do in February, you do kind of year round. I'd love for you to share with everybody, um, why this calling was your calling. I know you've written a book. I've read it, Black History Saved My Life. Talk a little bit about that to kind of frame the conversation.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I think as a black person in America, there comes a point in time in your life where you begin to ask questions of your existence and your place in the world. And your ability to move forward through that pathway and go down that rabbit hole is predicated upon the environment that you're in. I was fortunate enough being born and raised on the south side of Chicago to have a mother who was an educator, a father who worked at Sears for 30 years, and they were stewards of my education. They answered every single question I had, but not just by giving me the answer, but by putting me in an environment where I could satisfy my curiosity, you know? And
Yeah,
although I did not begin to study Black history until I was in college 20 some odd years ago, I began asking questions of my existence from what I remember since the age of about 9 when I asked my mom why we hadn't had a Black president. And it just didn't make sense to me because I was always exposed to the regality of my history in the house. Even though I went to a predominantly white school for elementary, I still saw greatness all around me. We had posters all around us. We had the books in the house and in the sculptures and stuff. So for me, it's like
yeah,
something has to be wrong. Is there something wrong with us, or is it society? And I think that Black history gives you the framework to say, oh no, it's not the people, it's the system.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Exactly right.
yeah. So like I just kind of followed that man throughout my life.
That's something that James Baldwin talks extensively about as well. That he had to go to Paris to understand and recognize that the real social terror was not just a figment of his imagination, but it was a real social terror that would kill him if he turned around and wasn't paying attention, didn't have his head on a swivel. And what I love about the way you talk about Black history is there's so many things today that we take for granted that we forget were grounded in Black survivalist mentality, in Black thriving mentality, in Black resistance to oppression. Everything from the phrase woke to the DAP. I mean, I love these tidbits of history, and I want to talk about those, but I really want to lean into non-Black allies and the kind of work that they can be doing in this space. And one of the pieces of content, by the way, if you haven't already subscribed to Ernest, you need to. But one of the pieces of content that you put out every so often is about how white abolitionists worked with Black leaders in this space. And I don't want to bring that up to co-op Black history, but I want to bring it up because I think people need to understand that there's a deliberate reason why this is not taught in schools. And it's important that we understand what that reason is and we understand what these icons, I mean, everybody knows John Brown, but he's just one of many. So talk a little bit about that and how folks can better educate themselves on these important lessons.
Yeah, it's important for folks to know that when we talk about this struggle, we're not talking about black people versus white people. We're talking about right versus wrong,
Exactly.
morality and immorality. It just so happens that we have been targeted because of how people view our race. And, as a person who's from Chicago and then taught between Chicago and a surrounding suburb that was very diverse, I was always kind of curious about the fact that, well, look, I'm teaching at a school that's mostly Latino, black, mostly low income. But when I'm teaching about these heroes, I had to second guess myself and say, but what about for my white students who are mostly poor, mostly
Hmm.
in rural areas? Because I know how I felt on the other side. So I wanted to make sure I was giving them examples of people they could model their life after. If the only hero they had was Dr. King, and that's cool, but they have to be able to see themselves in that because they can't operate the same way and they wouldn't need to operate the same way. It's the same way when I grew up watching superheroes. I mean, it hit harder. Like, I love Spider-Man, but it hit hard when you saw the Black Power Ranger, when you saw Static Shock, and of course, as an adult, you see Wakanda Forever, right? So one year, I said I want to make sure that parents who follow me, black parents, are very particular about giving their kids black like role models outside of what we are traditionally shown, athletes, entertainers, and stuff like that. And then I'll say, you know what, my audience is very diverse though. Maybe I should reframe this too. White parents, you should be, you know what I'm saying? Like you should be identifying white folks who were on this side of the struggle. And in that video, before I even made that speech, I said, can y'all even name five people? Because off the top of my head, I knew I had some like I could name more than five, but I had to really stop and think. And I
Yeah.
was like, shoot, I don't I don't think that's a common thing. And I
Yep.
posted I gave this funny, bro, because I gave a speech at a JJC, Joliet Junior College. It was a small group of college kids that were there. And it's been seen several million times when I post it online because I think it always resonates. Why can y'all name all the presidents? The murderers, the rapists, like the people who this current president has modeled his lifestyle and practices after, but you can't name the thousands of white people throughout history who were fighting against him. There's a white brother around the 1780s, Warner Mifflin. This dude, they said, was dang near 7 feet in the 1780s. And can you imagine
Yeah.
that?
That's wild.
Like, where was
That's wild.
basketball when you needed it? But I'm glad we didn't because he may not have understood his important role, right? He
Right.
was advocating for reparations in the 1780s. Benjamin
Amazing.
Lay was described as a dwarf. And Benjamin Lay was like selling everything that was cotton. He was living in a cave in Philadelphia. He was doing these demonstrations where he would steal white folks' kids to let them know how it felt. So if white people see that, and then they think about how they were taught that John Brown was crazy, you start to connect the dots and say, wait, was John Brown crazy or was the system crazy? Why
Yeah.
can't I name more? They want you to be like the colonizer, y'all,
Yep.
not the people who fought for justice.
Beautifully said. I mean, there's one name that always comes to mind, Theodore Sedgwick, who was the lawyer for Elizabeth Freeman, the first black woman to sue for her freedom 100 years before the Civil War in Boston. And it's one thing. I talk about reframing the narrative. Is one thing for her to recognize that. Hold on a second. The new Massachusetts Constitution says all people are created equal as a human being. This should apply to me. But it's another thing for her to go and convince a lawyer, because lawyers at the time didn't care. But this man was an abolitionist and said, "Yeah, I like it. Let's run with it. Let's push it forward." And it was that fusion of a black woman, a white man, a black enslaved person, a white lawyer working together against injustice, right? And that goes back to the point you're saying that this is not black versus white or white versus black. It's right versus wrong. It's unifying in that space to undo the damage that was done. And that's what needs to happen today. And so let's kind of bring it to modern day of what we're seeing right now with ICE and with this massive expansion of ICE targeting black and brown communities, targeting Somalis, targeting Haitians, targeting Latinos. And we're seeing kind of perpetuation of yesteryear in particular. And you've written extensively about the slave patrols and the role that they played and kind of how that's transformed today. Talk a little bit about those parallels from 150, 200 years ago to 2026 America.
Yeah, and this speaks to why knowing this history from a progressive lens is so important. We don't just teach history so that we can learn facts. We want to be able to put the pieces together to understand how they connect to the problems we have today and the things that are unresolved. We
Yeah.
know that the first police systems in this country were explicitly for slave patrolling. We understand that on the plantation economy, that structure was based on having an overseer, or as KRS-One would say overseer, officer, like that similarity right there is kind of funny too. Like they were employed to watch us and ensure that we were working and staying on task or doing the duties of an enslaved person. And if you were to run away at that time, what they would describe, of course, as drapetomania, you're crazy for thinking you
Yeah.
should run away. They would have somebody go catch you. They would
Mm.
have people kidnap your children, separate families. So I think what people have to understand is this system, like Dr. King talks about, they have not, it hasn't reached this moral epiphany, this moral awakening to say that we shouldn't do this anymore. It says that we should adapt how we do it. So what we're seeing in this day and age is how they adapt to what is more politically correct. The more that we use these devices like cell phones, and of course, Dr. King and them back in the day were using, the nightly news to expose this, the more they have just begun to say, well, let's find a different, more surreptitious way to do this. And that's what we have to be able to continue to expose, because when you see them kidnapping kids and bombing preschoolers, like preschool or daycares and things like that, these are the same tactics they've used. And they're employing people who have no recollection of historical memory to understand how they've been used in the past and how they could actually stand in a way to stop this. Kidnapping children then, kidnapping kids now. We can say the specific facts are different, of course, right? But we understand that this empire operates in a very particular way to disenfranchise people using the exact same tactics. Plantation policies are still around.
So let's talk about the application today, because obviously, and Dr. Michelle Alexander talks about this in her book, The New Jim Crow, when she points out, and so does Dr. Ibram Kendi in his book, Stamped from the Beginning, where they talk about people think that racism exists because of ignorance. And that if we can just better educate people, then suddenly racism will disappear. But they miss the fact that the systems of racism that we have today, the systems of white narcissism that we have today, are not there by accident. They're not there due to ignorance. They're extraordinarily sophisticated. You can look at the gerrymandering, the racial gerrymandering, the very specific voter ID laws targeting Black Americans, the very specific immigration policies that target non-white people. I mean, on one hand, you got Donald Trump claiming there's Christian genocide in Nigeria, and then he's banning refugees from Nigeria from coming here while accepting South African refugees when there's nothing happening to white people in South Africa. And so it is very sophisticated. So how do you counter that then? How do you actually overcome these highly attuned, sophisticated forms of racism, of racial superiority? Because you look at it on the surface and you're like, well, everyone can vote. Well, and what's wrong with getting an ID? Why wouldn't you want an ID? But it's missing the deeper perspective. So how do we actually organize and fight back against these systems designed to oppress people of color and Black people in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question, great insight. I think we have to start from the framework of understanding that inherently this institution, this social structure was created through racism. Like when we talk about um the fact that this country would not be as profitable as it is and has been without the genocide of indigenous people, without the enslavement of my ancestors. We have to always start from there. And I think
Hmm.
when we understand that, we can't be surprised when we find these links. And people will be, they'll be uncomfortable, they'll be offended when you say, you know what, that link is to racism. But instead of blaming the people who created this edifice or the people who allow it to continue to go, they'll frame you as a race baiter. They'll say you make everything about race. We have to understand everything here is about race.
Yeah.
It's about capitalism. It's about
Yes.
sexism. Like all roads lead to that. You can't tell me that out of all these presidents we've had, that we've only found one black person that's qualified. No women, no women at all, huh? Like no people of any other background for as long as other people have been here. It's a fix, y'all. It's a Tim Donaghy officiated fix. So,
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
so when we talk about how we use history, for me, it's like let's identify what the problem is, right? And then let's look at people who have actively fought it in the past, people who were effective to a certain point, and then what may have led to, the untimely demise of the organization of the tactics. For me, I would say that we have to understand that, of course, voting is one tool, but that's not the only tool that you use to create something better. We have to look at people like the Black Panthers. I just got finished reading this amazing book right here because I'm always trying to shout out folks. I
Yeah.
highly recommend this book. The visuals, everything is
Revolution in
amazing.
our time.
Revolution in Our Time, the Black Panther Party's promise to the people. It even starts with enslavement too. Shout out to the educator who gave this to me when I was in the Bay Area a few years back too. Like when you understand, it's quite simply this, and I don't mean to like simplify this, but when you look at the fact that Huey P. Newton said we started this organization in 1966, right? And one of the first things we started to do was we patrolled the police.
Mm,
And we saw, and he said we saw that the incidences of police brutality drop sharply.
mm,
We saw people in the community who saw somebody who was there for them for the first time, who actually cared, and they felt relieved, right? I think about situations like that. What I understand from that is I'm my brother's keeper. I'm my sister's keeper, right? Like I'm responsible for all of us. Each one teach one. Right? We have to understand what history will teach us is that we cannot look for another person, another hero that we want to deify as a person that's going to save us. Because then when we catapult, when we place that person on a pedestal, then we sit back and say, ah, yeah, go ahead and handle that, King.
mhm.
Go ahead and handle that, X. Go ahead and handle that, Rosa. We have to like every community has to do an audit. We study the
Yeah,
Panthers, and then, but again, we don't deify them. What does that look like today? It doesn't mean creating that name and saying we got the new Black Panthers. It means what can I do right now? Like for example, in Detroit, New Era Detroit personifies this to me and how they patrol and how they do things for the community, for the kids especially. It's a all hands on deck type situation. Like you said, it's only one aspect of not knowing. But then once you know, are you going to try to protect what you have? And I
that's right.
think a lot of white people have to really consider that moving forward because there will be a time. History shows us that there will be a time when you have to make a decision. And that decision will be, will you give up these superficial privileges so that we can have justice for all, or will you allow this entire thing to topple? This cannot be sustained by greed and avariciousness. We seen we see what's happening, bro. Like the files, all of this ties in together. So it starts with one aspect of identifying the history, the problem now, identifying people who have done it in the past. And I would just close and say this: we got to think about the fact that it's 100 years of Black history. This started in part due to some brothers, Dr. Carter G. Woodson especially, who met in Chicago in 1915
That's
and
right.
created an organization, right? And that organization 11 years later created Black History Month. So my challenge to people is to say like, all you got to do is meet with four other people in your community, address the problem. It only takes a few of y'all to come together. It's not going to be perfect, but you can't perfect it unless you get going and get started now.
That's right. You can't edit what doesn't exist. You can't improve what doesn't exist. You got to start somewhere. And if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Mr. Ernest Crim III, my favorite Black history teacher. There's this point you made about simply watching the police, observing the police. This is what Renee Good was doing. This is what Alex Preddy was doing. And I said it before. I'll say it again. We need messengers, not martyrs. I don't need people getting shot. I don't need people throwing their life on the line and being martyrs for the cause. We don't need that because that's not sustainable. What we need though are messengers. We need a mass movement of people. And there's a deep psychology behind this. There's been studies done on something as simple as Halloween candy. I don't know if you've heard this before, but you know how on Halloween people will put up a sign that says please take one piece of candy and people will come up and take one piece and inevitably somebody will come up and grab the whole thing and run away. And so all they did in this experiment was for certain houses, they put up a mirror so that you could watch yourself take the piece of candy. And simply by having a mirror, the rates of people grabbing all the candy and running away decreased by like some significant number. And so
Hmm.
it's not even that somebody else is watching. Even when you have to look at yourself in the eye doing something wrong, you're like, you know what? I shouldn't do this. Let me just take one and walk away. And same thing applies here. There's this push now that we're gonna have body cameras and all these ICE agents, and that's different than the community watching. That actually, to me, is even more dangerous because at the end of the day, the dude who shot Rene Good, he was recording it himself. He didn't care. The people who killed Alex Pretty knew they were being recorded. They didn't care. Philando Castillo was killed while being recorded. They didn't care. That's not going to actually solve anything. That's just going to create a more police surveillance state. And if they decide we're not going to release it, then what are we going to do? This is where we need to play an active role in being more engaged and being more involved and looking out for our community. So Ernest, here's my question. Here's the number one question I get is how do I get started? I look at you, Ernest. You've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers on social media, and it's hard to say. Well, you started 20 years ago, and you've built it up over 20 years. How do I get started now? What are the first two or three steps I should be taking to play a more active role in combating racial injustice and being a better ally to those who are being particularly targeted in this fascist
Mhm.
regime that we're in right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak to a couple different audiences because I think it's different, right? If you are a black person, I think one of the first things you need to do is really take care of your mental well-being in this political climate, especially if you have been organizing, for a long time. If you've been involved in this, your life is in your existence is inherently political, just by you being within the confines of this social structure and its lines. Make sure your family is okay, black people. Make sure your mental well-being. Make sure your extended community is okay. Make sure you are exercising ways to stay in touch with people outside of these devices. Make sure you have places to go to in case these streams and things shut down. Get in a community. I'm an advocate. I would say, go to church, whatever works for you. Like, go somewhere where you can be in a community with people who love you for who you are. Okay. That's
Love
very
that.
important. We have to
Love that.
find a way. We need to heal, but also too, we have to continue to be active. We cannot, of course, fully ignore what's going on outside because it has always impacted us. And that extends to people of color in general in this country. For those of you who are white watching this, I would say, and I would take you through the journey I had because it starts with the curiosity. I think that's true for anybody. Just don't ask us, don't keep asking us what books to read. Just start reading. Just start
Right.
reading. I just
Right.
showed you a book. Matter of fact, I'm gonna show you it again. I got a book too, but like my book is really based on everything I learned from people like this. So like grab a book, but I don't want you to just read and be like I'm in a book club. I want you to read it and say, what does that when you have that moment when you feel the moment to pause, move. What does this mean for me? Because there are certain times when you read something, you're gonna be like, dang, that's this, right? You need to get with some people, not just online, but who live in your proximity, your radius that you can connect with. And if you are stumped on how to do this, you might want to go to your local library. They have a bunch of events and they're waiting on you to come by. Go to your library, go to some of those events, connect with people that go to like-minded events, right? If
Hmm.
you are if you are really kind of nervous about it, go to a city council meeting. That's when I first started, right? I dealt with the hate crime. I posted that online. That's when I jumped out of my shell, but I did not start organizing locally until I said, okay, this video is everywhere, but what about where I live? I went to a city council meeting in 2017 and spoke up about the lack of black owned businesses. I had no idea that we even had a black business district 50, 60 years priorly. But I went there with the question. I posted it online, and people who had similar questions, we started to organize, and we still do to this day. And you have to always remember too that this is not like a 15, 20-year journey. Even if you got started in 2020, it's not a 5, 6-year journey. This is a life
That's right.
commitment. And you have to figure out if you are white, go to those school board meetings, speak up about why your kids ain't learning black history, why they not learning a history that is non-Eurocentric. You know what I'm saying?
That's
Those are
right.
different things you can do. Use that. They're going to listen to you more than me, right?
That's right.
Send emails. If you don't want to go outside just yet because it's cold, I get it. Send an email to every city council member, okay? Every township supervisor, the mayor, um, again, school board members, they are lonely, okay? And they get elected by like 5, 10% of the people in that
That's right.
local area. I'm speaking to the folks who live in these
Yep.
small, medium-sized towns. You know what I
True.
mean? Everybody ain't voting.
That's true.
If you
That's
show
true.
up, hold them accountable. That's how we begin to organize. And I ain't got to tell you the rest. It's gonna happen. Last thing I'm gonna say is some of this stuff got to be discussed offline. So I'm gonna just say less right there.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think this is where I say to those who are watching, we got 350 people watching this right now. That this is where you gotta invest in Black voices. It's not just a matter of posting a Dr. King meme or a Malcolm X quote or the Rosa Parks T-shirt that says "Nah" on it. That's nice. It's good, but I'm telling you, it's woefully insufficient. It's like going to a march and then not voting. It's like putting up a sign in your yard for a candidate and then not donating or not knocking any doors. Like you gotta follow through. And so invest in Black voices. Mr. Ernest Crim is a perfect example of somebody you should all subscribe to as a paying subscriber if in your budget. But at the very least, you should be following his content and sharing it because the fact of the matter is, and Ernest, tell me if you think I'm wrong on this one, that the way corporate media is going, it's being bought by billionaires to perpetuate a status quo that wants us to keep fighting one another in these culture wars while they continue to get more and more power and strip away the rights of all of us. And until and unless we stand united by investing our time and resources it's going to get worse. And that kind of leads me to my last couple of questions in the last 5 minutes that we have. With everything going the direction that it is, two things annoy me. One, when people say, well, this is just unprecedented. My guy, you tell me you haven't looked at American history at all. This is actually very precedented. And that's the problem, that this continues to happen. And so, my question is, what inspiration do you draw from history in these moments and how to get out of this? And then, what needs to change this time so that 50, 60, 70 years from now, our kids and grandkids don't find themselves in the exact same circumstances as right now?
Man, that is such a profound question, bro. Because I get a little emotional with that because this is a part of the reason why I love doing this. And I think like I mean, again, books on top of books, man. Uh, People like this,
Yeah, that's right.
James
Until next
Baldwin.
time.
I think when you read that type of work from people like, James Baldwin, for example, Toni Morrison, for example,
Yeah.
you find solace and understanding that you're not alone. You're not alone in this moment, right? And when I think of the fact that, I mean, my history I think this is very important to say too. We have to make sure that we stop like moving the experience that Black Americans have had in this country when we speak about other groups of people, right? I mean, people will say, look, nation was built by immigrants. I understand the sentiment, but my people, brother, were not immigrants. My people were
No.
human trafficked. My people
Right.
were forced here to America and I don't even want to say we built the country. I don't want to say that. We were forced to. We didn't come here and say, you know what, I want to help this nation. No, like
No.
my aunt, the people who existed so that I could be here lived through hell their whole life. Most of the time, this country has been a thing, man. My grandmother is 90 years old. She was born and raised in Bolton, Mississippi, which is right next to Jackson. My family left the South to come to not because of the weather, of course. There's nothing great about the weather here in Chicago. The people are great, the culture's
Yeah.
great, but like
Weather
she
ain't.
came here in the 50s, the 60s on both sides. They came from the South, man. Like they lived through Jim Crow. My grandmother would have been 30 years old when she could have voted for the first time in the South. My grandmother saw like Obama get elected. My grandmother's 90. She often talks about she don't know how much longer she got, and she saw everything come full circle.
Yeah.
My grandfather worked as a post office worker, bro, for 30 years. He went to the military at 15. He lied so that he could help provide for his family. He started working at 6, shining shoes to help provide for his family in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And you can see some of the pictures behind me.
Yep.
I cannot for a second say that, well, this is a little bit too much. There are people I cannot name, bro. I can't name. I did the African ancestry test and everything. You know what I'm saying? Like I know a little piece, but there's a point where I have to stop because of this experience.
Yeah.
So I'm obligated. There were people who were 1/4 of all people who were enslaved were kids, bro.
Yep.
There was a child in my lineage who was stripped from her homeland, his homeland, never saw it again. I owe it to them to keep going. How dare I even consider that? And I've been telling people, bro, like Harriet Tubman did not care. She didn't care who the president is. The presidents back then was way more racist, right? Like Harriet Tubman was like through several terms.
That's
I'm
right.
about to get my people, and I'm going back, and I'm burning down the plantation. I'm gonna rescue some more people, and they gonna deny me my pension for
Yeah.
saving this country.
I
Like,
love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, that's the framing that we need to think about, and that's it's a reminder that don't confuse legality and power for morality and justice. The two are not related. They should be in an ideal world, but they're not. They're not necessarily related, and it's important that we focus. Our north star needs to be morality and justice, not legality and power. There's that powerful video of an indigenous woman protecting a Latina woman who is essentially also indigenous from ICE, you know, uh, who are the descendants of slave patrols and European colonizers. It's just a microcosm of American history in one moment. Brother Ernest, this has been a wonderful conversation. We got to do this more often. We got to do this in
yeah,
person next time.
yeah.
Shout out before you go how folks can follow you, how they can support you in the work that you're doing.
Thanks again, man, for the opportunity. I got my Instagram back. I was banned for 3 weeks. I got it back right before
Wild.
Black History Month, so I'm thankful for that. You can find me on IG at MRCrim3, but I'm here mainly now because I trust this platform more. So follow me on Crim's Class. Like Qasim said, please subscribe. Please become a paid subscriber so we can continue to do this work. You can also find me at ernestcrim.com. Speaking of inquiries, I also have a book, How Black History Can Save Your Life.
Mr. Ernest Crim III, your favorite Black history teacher, my favorite Black history teacher. Brother, thanks for the time today. We'll continue the conversation and God bless you.
Same, brother. Thank you.
Peace out.